Well, loads of speculation, as you would expect when the transfer window is closed, about who could be moving when the transfer window opens. And Janusz Michallik, it looks like we've got a couple of midfielders, a defensive midfielder and an attacking midfielder who looks set to be on the move over the next few days. We're going to group them together, but talk about them separately. Declan Rice and James Maddison. And when Arsenal came back in with a renewed bid for Declan Rice, Manchester City said, nope, that's too much for us, so we're not interested at that price, probably. And it looks like Declan Rice is heading to Arsenal. If he does, what kind of player is Arsenal getting? And also, how big a signing could this be?
Well, massive. I mean, a perfect profile and perfect fit for Arsenal. If you look at Declan Rice, I mean, the saga with Manchester City, I never believed in that, really. I mean, for Manchester City, Declan Rice would have been a luxury player, one that they absolutely don't need, not just because of of Rodri, but because of the fact that John Stones and the way they play hybrid. John Stones coming into the midfield as well. So I think, I don't want to call him surplus requirements, because he offers you a lot of flexibility, but he probably wouldn't get the playing time that he gets at Arsenal, where there he can be the anchor that they've missed, the anchor that they didn't have. And look how far Arsenal have gotten this past season in terms of leading the league for almost the entire season, with the exception of when it mattered, right? But I don't want to remind that the Arsenal supporters. So look, I mean, flexibility, I wouldn't say that, because he's going to be holding, he's going to be the man that everything's going to be played around, I think, at Arsenal. So as I said, people are going to point to the price. As I've said, pay the price right away. 2, 3, 4 weeks ago, I think those are, there's few players in the league, and I'm not, putting him together with some of the greatest players, but there are few players that, there's a price on them and you better pay. And I think it's going to be worth it, because ultimately, if Arsenal do not improve their position from this past season, it's not going to be because of Declan Rice. Declan Rice is going to do his job, and he's going to do his job extremely well. If Arsenal falters, it'll be more to the players around them that maybe didn't play to their level.
One of the things that Arsenal had going against them last season was not being able to replace quality that left the team if it was injured, like Saliba. Yes, Gabriel Jesus was replaced by Nketiah for a spell, but then his form tailed off. But you're pretty much, and this isn't Declan Rice coming into the squad, this is Declan Rice, of course, being a starter, but you're strengthening a squad, and that's what they needed to do. So the question has to be, is it the final piece of the jigsaw, or what else do they need to get to Manchester City's level, which is about that consistency and about that bringing players into the team if there's injuries or suspensions that don't weaken the team?
Well, I mean, with Declan Rice, I think I know where you're leading, but I mean, he's a major, major point of that team. This is
of course.
In terms of importance, obviously they understand some of the needs. There's talk about, Timber from Ajax, which, by the way, makes a lot of sense, even though they, you can say they have hybrid defenders. I mean, if you get past Saliba, who's obviously very important, and Gabriel, Zinchenko comes inside much better in that role than he is defensively. Question marks at right back, of course, because Ben White did well, but he's not truly that. But I think Timber makes sense, because when you really think about Arsenal, they play with 3 center backs, don't they? Because once Zinchenko comes inside, that becomes the back 3. And in the past, they put towards the end of the season Jakub Kiwior, the Polish international. We've also seen him at left back if Zinchenko wasn't available. So I think there's that one piece where I think Ben White can fill in as well. But I think in Timber, you're getting a young player at a big club who's played at the top competitions, played in the World Cup for Holland, obviously with Ajax in European football in the Champions League and all of that. So even though he's young, you're getting a lot of experience. Hopefully, they're getting Timber from 2 seasons ago, not necessarily the last year, but at that young age, of course, there's going to be fluctuation in form. Elsewhere, you still think, I still think. If number 9 is not needed, and right now we're not hearing a lot about a true number 9 from Arsenal, and I can understand that, how Mikel Arteta wants to play. Part of me still thinks that they need a very good winger, because Saka cannot be asked to do what he did last season. And he suffered because of that. He played all the time. He had a great season. You can say he's young, and, when they're young, they're capable. But I don't think that serves Mikel Arteta or Bukayo Saka well to kind of, exploit him as much as they did. Martinelli was wonderful, but it makes you wonder, in case of injury or loss of form, Trossard is a good player, as we've seen. He's kind of been pushed inside at times. So I think Mikel Arteta is having a look there. But I think that, Reece Nelson, still a project. So obviously he's capable of doing it. I would go for a more of a sure thing, an experienced winger, just in case.
Okay. The importance of Rice to Arsenal, if and probably when it goes through, cannot be underestimated. They certainly need them. What about James Maddison to Spurs? Looks like that deal's on the verge of being concluded. From a Spurs perspective, that could be just as important to them and their needs, because they've not really had that type of player since Christian Eriksen or Dele Alli when he was at his peak. That could be as important to them as Rice is to Arsenal in that different position.
Absolutely, especially when you look at Spurs as a whole. And let's face it, I think last season was one to forget for Spurs. It continues to be a saga because of Harry Kane. Does he stay? Does he go? But on the assumption that he stays, because he's still their player. You look at Maddison, and you have to look at Spurs as a whole, and that midfield as a whole. What does he bring? That creativity that you've mentioned, absolutely needed. But we almost, and thinking about this, I almost forgot how good that midfield with him can be now. Because let's face it, I mean, you're going to get Rodrigo Bentancur back, who wasn't there for a long period of time because of injury at a very important time when they were fighting for top four, who's a great player. I mean, it's very much box-to-box type of player. You can plug him just about anywhere, right? Then you have, Højbjerg, the steady Eddie. You have Skip, that's an option, maybe off the bench, but he's proven already, that can play. And then you have Bissouma, who's also kind of, his first season there, has quality that he hasn't shown. So when you add James Maddison to that, and then you look at that midfield, that's multifunctional. They have every player that's needed if they're healthy and top form. And then you look at the front three, and Richarlison, Son, and Harry Kane, and you say to yourself, that's not bad at all, because Son is not going to be as bad as he was last season. He's a quality player that just struggled just as the Spurs did. And I think Richarlison, after coming from Everton, is going to show the level that's much higher. So you look at that midfield, the options that they have, the front three, and you say to yourself, you know what? Spurs aren't bad. Obviously, they have to fix themselves defensively. I mean, they were absolutely horrible. What did they concede? 63 goals. There's question at goalkeeper as well. So, I mean, there's still work to do. But that midfield, because I think we almost forgot about the Bentancur and Bissouma. And I think that this is a very good sign. Very much like Declan Rice to Arsenal. It just makes sense. And that, to me, is important.
Well, you've got Bentancur, you've got Bissouma, you've got Højbjerg, as you mentioned, you've got others from his time at Celtic. Ange Postecoglou, he pretty much favours a 4-3-3. Obviously, it depends on the players that he has available. So if you've got those three, could you play Maddison as part of your front three? Because he does like width, he does like inverted wingers, Ange Postecoglou, or is it a change of shape when he takes over at Spurs?
It could be variation of 4-2-3-1 in some way. I mean, Harry Kane's still going to be dropping there. I mean, James Maddison is not going to be surplus to requirements there. It may be the role of Bentancur. Obviously, rotation is very important as well for them. So, if you look at, the quality of that signing is also important, because all the names that I've mentioned, I mean, I've never felt that Spurs had an issue going forward. But let's face it, Ange Postecoglou is an attacking-minded manager. He likes attacking football. That he's done that almost, not almost, everywhere he's gone. So I think that message in itself, I think it's going to bring a smile to the face of, as I mentioned, Son, Richarlison. Harry Kane doesn't need it because he scores every goal, every game for club or country. And now James Maddison, and you add, his abilities on set pieces, which you can't forget, which is important as well. So there may be changes. It may stay 4-3-3. And obviously, as I've said, rotation comes into it. It could be very, very attacking-minded 4-2-3-1 as well.
Given James Maddison's ability, and both in goal scoring, but also in creative ability and getting assists, is there any way that Harry Kane might think, you know what, I've now got someone that could put the ball on a plate for me and I could get even more goals, and maybe I don't have to come as deep as I've been doing. So maybe I might just stay that one more season because they've gone out and signed James Maddison, or is they not even thinking of that?
I think he should be. I mean, I'm assuming you want to chat if Harry Kane should go or stay.
No, I'm going to leave that to the end. That's
Yeah,
the little
you want to leave
tease
that
for
to
the end.
Well, of course. I mean, good players. I don't think it's going to change the role of Harry Kane because I think he's found out that coming in the midfield, he helps everybody, right? As I've said before, he often starts the play that he ultimately finishes, right? So he almost gets an assist to himself in a way, and he does because he's that intelligent, right? Coming in, very often playing the ball wide, gives himself just enough time to then get in front of goal and often finish that. So I don't think he will change that. I don't think he should change that. However, I think when he is in those attacking positions, when there's no need to drop deep, obviously, if you look at James Maddison, he can find a pass, he can thread the ball through, and he'll be looking for Harry Kane. So, before you had that partnership between Heung-min Son and Harry Kane, remember that season where they were both great in terms of assists and servicing each other. Now you have another option. So, as I've said, I think on paper this is perfect if James Maddison stays healthy, because that's been an issue for him.
Now, you and I have done another more in-depth piece about Harry Kane staying or going with Bayern Munich linked. Now, the purpose of this, though, to end with, is if Harry Kane goes, because we've already spoken. You've spoken plenty about Harry Kane staying and how James Maddison and him could team up, how they could play a 4-3-3. How does a James Maddison Spurs lineup look without Harry Kane next season?
Well, I mean, obviously they have to look, right. I mean, if they sell Harry Kane, it's going to be for good amount of money. So, we don't know who that player may be. His role would be much more important, right? And he'd have a little bit more freedom in that midfield because maybe, as you've mentioned, Harry Kane dropping into that midfield, maybe the player they get won't do as much. And I just think the role of Richarlison and so on puts an additional pressure on it. But obviously, if that happens, you and I and everybody else around the world will be talking and wondering who's going to be the new number 9, or maybe a couple of players in that position that will rotate, because it's going to be nearly impossible to replace the output that we've seen from Harry Kane over the years.
Yeah, but ultimately, bottom line is, it's a super signing for Spurs if they get it done, James Maddison, and a super signing for Arsenal, Declan Rice, if they get it done.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week, subscribe to ESPN+.